My name is Deb Wenger, and I'm an Assistant Dean for Partnerships and Innovation here at the School of Journalism and New Media. So happy to see a room packed for what is our second annual Willie Morris Writers Series event. Last year, we kicked it off with the amazing Wright Thompson. Many of you know, yes, exactly, little clap. Many of you know Wright for his work with ESPN. He is a Clarksdale, Mississippi native, so we embrace him even though he went to a different university for his journalism degree. But we won't talk about that. We will have some time for questions, so please be thinking about what you want to ask. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wright to introduce Taffy Brodesser-Akner and tell you all about her fabulous new book. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. I first became aware of Taffy through her profiles. She is far and away the best profile writer in America, and I thought, that's really great. I wish her luck. And then I read her investigative pieces, like the one that she's been nominated for a National Magazine Award for, and I thought, well, that's okay. Well, that's a hard thing to do. And then I read her brilliant new literary novel, and that has set the world on fire, finalist for a National Book Award, and I thought, so I am full of envy and gratitude that she is here. And she, it's funny, this is the Willie Morris lecture series, and I don't know, is anybody here from Yazoo City? No. So Willie was from Yazoo City. He was a writer and an editor. And for our purposes, the thing that's interesting is he was a Mississippian, enough of a beloved Mississippian, a state that adores writers. He was, when he died, he lay in state at the old Capitol. And he was the editor of Harper's Magazine in the 1960s when it basically invented the kind of stories I write and that the kind of stories that she is now the best in the world at. And so what this is every year we want to bring someone who Willie would have liked to edit, someone whose writing Willie would have appreciated, someone who Willie would like to hang out with, and get them here to talk about the craft of writing. And as a reminder, you're all good, seriously. Don't worry. And just as a reminder, one, that writing is a craft and you can learn how to do it from listening to people, and that it isn't some, black magic or some sort of it is something you can learn how to do if you listen and pay attention and want to. And that as you can learn from Willie's story growing up in Yazoo City, as you can learn from me coming from Clarksdale, as you'll hear, if she talks about her own road from having a dream to being able to create something like this, if you want it bad enough, you really can get there from anywhere. And so without further ado, this is my friend Taffy. Please welcome her to Oxford.
Oh. That is such a nice introduction. Thank you, Wright. And thank you all for showing up here. I'll Venmo you later. And also thank you. My son is, I think, there, sitting next to Wright. And I really appreciate you showing him that some people would like to hear me talk. 9 years old is a tough age. So thank you all for coming. And, I loved Wright's introduction specifically because a theory I have in the world is that writers are the most jealous and petty people in the world. And because we're born that way, the actual humanity we can find and the work we can do in the world is to become people who are more generous than we are petty. And this morning, I was reading a little bit about Willie Morris, and I found out that when his friend James Jones died, he finished his friend's book so that it could be published, which is an amazing thing in light of the fact that all writers are incredibly petty. So I think I'm very honored to be here. And also, I got some news this morning that my editor at the New York Times Magazine, his father passed away this week. And my editor at the New York Times Magazine is the most upright, movie version of a magazine editor you have ever seen. And he is someone who has set me on the path to so many good stories. And so I would just like to dedicate this to the memory of his father, Peter Benoit. So thank you for that. And then now I'll just stop thanking people and talk about writing. I'm so glad that most of you appear to be student-ish. So later, if you have any questions about anything, you can ask them to me. But I'm just going to talk about writing, and most of all, I'm going to talk about what a brutal couple of years it's been in the world, and how it isn't just that we all feel completely demoralized. It's that as a writer, it is really hard to answer the question, why do we do this? When the thing that we do is so often ignored, argued with, diminished, thrown away, forgotten, or not even seen in the first place, which is the worst part of it, right? In fact, Wright did not tell you which of my profiles he found me on, but it was a story, my favorite story I ever did. It was about Billy Bob Thornton. I spent 4 days on a tour bus with him through Alabama because he has a band. And I spent a lot of time with him, and I was so proud of this story. And it was published on November 10th, 2016. And if you recall, it was a busy week, and it had been planned for publication in light of a Hillary victory when everyone would be feeling really great about their choices, and instead the world fell apart. And so no one read that story except for Wright Thompson, who read it on an airplane and reached out to me, and that was very nice. In the intervening time, it's gotten worse. You could write a great story and nobody reads it. You could write a great story and people tell you that you're fake news. There are so many things that you could do right now that backfire, that it threatens the thing in us that has to fight to be vulnerable in order to make something great. Excuse me. Hope the microphone picked up my burp. So why do we do this? Let's start with that. Why would you want to do this? As my husband, who is a political writer, likes to say, journalism, the hours are terrible and the pay is crap, but at least people hate us. So why do we do this? I'll tell you, I don't know why everyone else does it. And I had a super weird experience this week where I met another journalist who it turns out is doing this for very bad reasons, like evil plot reasons. And I think, oh, that's why people hate journalists, because of that. But most of the people I know are more in line with what I think, which is that we are all striving to create more empathy in the world, right? This is my overall theory, that if we could create, if we all knew each other and we all talked, what we would find is actually very cliche and trite, that we have more in common than we have, than is different from us. This is a tried and true theory of mine that I've tested growing up in a Hasidic household of ultra-Republicans. This is a theory I've tested out, being a fish out of water so many times that I don't even know that there is water anymore at some point. But my theory is that if we were to all talk to each other, if we were to all know something about each other, then we would find something very radical, which is that we are all exactly the same. That's my theory, that we are all exactly the same. And what are the proofs of this? The proofs of this are that we generally like the same music, right? There's popular music. Have you ever watched a movie trailer, like on YouTube? And some of them are done so well, and we all cry at the same point. Like sometimes you could make a movie trailer, and there's this one point where everyone who's watching it will tear up. That's us being the same. We think we're different, and we think we're different because of a strange need in American culture to tell us how different we are. And that the word different comes to us first in the form of the word special, right? My kids come home to me from kindergarten and they say, look, I made a snowflake, and there's a picture of me in the middle of the snowflake because I am as unique as a snowflake. And I'm a journalist, so I say, are snowflakes really that unique? Like, who has really tested that whole thing that there are no two snowflakes alike? I have a theory that there are a lot of snowflakes alike, and nobody has ever really tested that. Likewise, I think that the children, which is, I hope he's still absorbed in his iPad, the children are not special either. They're all exactly alike this as well. Is he okay? We'll talk later, Haskell. But I don't think it behooves any of us to think of ourselves as so unique and so individual, because then what happens is that the pettiness that I spoke about before is ignited and we become jealous of each other. We become hateful of each other, right? And I don't know if you're paying attention or if you get the same internet that I do, but it doesn't appear that we need to hate each other anymore for the time being. It seems like we're good on hate, and that the work right now for anybody who's interested in writing has to be to go and create more empathy in the world. And again, I grew up in a household of ultra-Orthodox Jews, and I found the ways that we are similar. They might object. But as I went through my career and I started doing profiles, I also found the way that I'm not different from literally anyone. The things I have in common with Tom Hanks, the things I have in common with Bradley Cooper, the things I have in common, less so, with Gwyneth Paltrow, have been really profound to me. And I think that when we write great things, it will create more people reading those things. And the people reading will see that we were the connection, that we, the writer, showed them the bridge between us and the rest of the world. How is it possible that you have anything in common with Tom Hanks? How is it possible that you have anything in common with Tonya Harding? I promise you, we're all the same. We make different decisions, and decisions come in moments in our lives. But moments don't really define us unless they ruin our lives, right? Tonya Harding, good example of a moment that maybe didn't go so great and maybe ended up, do we all know who Tonya Harding is? Okay, good. Can I ask, how many people here are writing students? Oh, God. Are you in the, is this the right lecture? I'm just kidding. How many people here are aspiring writers? Like, who here wants to be a writer? Thank you. Statistically, some of you are too embarrassed to raise your hand because a lot of people want to be writers. Close your eyes, everyone, and now tell me who wants to be a writer. Wow, it's fewer. Maybe this experiment isn't working. So I'll tell you anyway that all of these rules for writing are also, I think, really good rules for your life, which are to listen, to examine, and to assume the commonality you have with people before you ever consider what is different about you. And know that differences are not a thing to be afraid of. Differences are just fine. Okay? Are we all on the same page? Give me a second, I'm gonna look up a note. Another weird thing. I was just speaking to some of your journalism students here. Are those guys still? Are those here? Ah, there. Hello. Okay. Hi. And one of the things that we were talking about were ways to get ahead in this as a career, right? And the thing that that occurred to me that I found most interesting is that it's a very rare career in which a woman might be in the position to get ahead more effectively than a man at this point. Now, why is that? There is some kind of diversity hiring going on, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fact that if we get to a blank page and we start writing, the amount of word combinations is so, the possible word combinations is so infinite that you can really find yourself completely at a loss. And that goes for every single person in here. A blank page is like a conversation that hasn't yet begun. What are the things that we say? And oftentimes I think that whereas I grew up informed completely that men had a lot of the advantage in this, which I think is true. The other thing is that there aren't that many women writers in my head when I sit down to write. When I've taught writing, the male students I have a real issue with the fact that there has been so much greatness before them that they don't understand what their contribution could be. Women, we have several, but several is not a big number, right? Several is we've had some great women reporters, we've had some great women writers. We haven't had a lot, and I'm sure there were a lot of women writers who were not given the opportunities that they should have been given. But when I sit down to write something, I am not tortured by what came before me. And it's at that point, now men, I will bring you into this, and also anyone else on the spectrum of gender, that is when you remember that we are all the same, and that for the amount of greatness that has come from us, that has come before us, the most dynamic thing that you could ever consider is that you have your own greatness to offer. That's not the same as saying that everyone is the same. Everyone is the same. And then when we come out, we are given different stimuli. We are given different educations. We are given different parents. We are given different circumstances. One person is profoundly affected by an earthquake. One person is given the gift of a great education. So that's where we all start to vary. And the work of being a writer and being a human, I think, is that we all have to figure out a way to come right back together. The thing that will happen for you to do that best is you reading, and also to contribute to it, to put in your voice and ask yourself, how am I exactly the same as everyone else? How are we doing here? Are there any questions so far? Someone should ask a question now. Yes.
I read your article on Gwyneth Paltrow for Taffy.
Thank you.
I really liked it. I don't know, your writing style is interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take it.
I was thinking, interesting in a good way. I was thinking, you were talking about how thinking that we're different can lead to pettiness. And I think, like, I was really confused most of the time I was reading the article because I couldn't tell if you were, like, praising her or being like, oh my gosh, that's regret.
I couldn't tell either. And I still don't know. Like, sometimes I'll meet someone who's like, oh, you hated her. And I'm like, yes. And sometimes I'll meet someone else, be like, you loved her way too much. And I'll say, yes. Gwyneth Paltrow occupies a really strange place in the psyche of the American woman of a certain age. I will say that. Thank you, American women of a certain age who are nodding vigorously along with us. That she's very different from me, And at some point, I realized that she was some kind of funhouse mirror where I couldn't even see her. I looked at her, and all that was reflected back to me were ways that I was not where I was like a messy slob picking my nose who had like a coffee stain down her shirt. Like I felt like I was 7 times her size, which actually might be an accurate figure, but maybe like 72, like in Ghostbusters, the big Pillsbury guy. Like that was me next to Gwyneth Paltrow, and it wasn't even a weight thing. It was like a lack of delicacy that I had, and that's a really interesting thing to bring up, because I think that a lot of journalism is preoccupied with us saying, I know for sure what is right and wrong. And I think that what journalism could use more than anything else is some ambivalence. Why? Because I'm a journalist and I'm incredibly ambivalent. I think that goop is poisoning the female psyche. I'm also buying the night cream because it's amazing. Like, I don't know the answer. I mean, you have to get comfortable with a certain hypocrisy of thought, and I think it's done us no good that the amount of the movies made of journalists fall into 2 categories. One, the journalist, the young woman journalist who sleeps with whoever she's interviewing, which I can promise you is not a thing that happens very often. And the other, or maybe it's just me. But the other thing that is, it's that they're all righteous people beyond flaw. And to pretend that we are not real people who are witnessing this and who have opinions about this is like, it's crazy. I hear from a lot of news reporters, mostly behind my back, that the idea of putting an opinion into an article or to not just laying out the information is how we got here in terms of bad discourse. To which I say, why were we pretending that there weren't people writing the stories with no opinion? I think that the thing I do is very honest. I say, here is how I felt. Here is how I was made to feel by this information, because I went there on your behalf. You are who I work for. Is it possible that you would have felt the same way too? I think so. You know why? Because we're all the same. A good experiment for this. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes again, and I really want all you guys to do it this time. Close your eyes for a second and think about the thing about me that you found most prominent. Meaning, like, having just watched me for 15 minutes, what is the thing about me that jumped out at you? And you all have different answers. Not all of you. Probably you have like a bunch of answers, but you can open your eyes now. Thank you for the literal half of you who listen to me. A very obedient group of people you are. Half of you picked something else. And the thing that you should write about in the profile you write of me for the New York Times, which you don't, is the thing that jumped out to you. Why? Because that's the confidence a writer needs, and that's also the truth. So while we're all the same, right? We'll go back to that. While we're all the same, we have a bunch of different influences, and we have a bunch of different interests. And our interest, your interest in my hair versus my nose versus my makeup versus my watch versus the fact that I keep burping, and I'm so sorry about that. Like, whatever it is that was most interesting to you, the work of a real writer is to ignore the rest and only describe that. And I have a feeling that the people writing the news were doing the same thing. My husband would go to a Trump rally, for example, and he would describe it. And then you would find someone at a different newspaper with different political leanings who described a complete other set of circumstances. One would describe that it was chaos. One would describe that it was heaven. And these are people who say we don't have political leanings, we're political journalists, we're not allowed to. I think if we could stop pretending that a real person wasn't in the room observing the information, we would all be a little bit better off. That's what I think. That was a great question. Thank you. Does anyone else have another question? I think we're open for questions now. Okay, hello.
I was interested in your the response to your question. Interested in your response to the question, like how many people are planning on writing or being writers or what have you. So I guess the question is, and this is for you personally, how do you know you're a writer, and what was your personal experience where you knew I am a writer?
That is a great question, and the answer is, if what I'm hearing in your question is you want to know if you're really a writer, the answer is yes. Here's why. Because this is a really stupid thing to want to be. Everything inside you should not want it. You should go into a good finance career. You should go into some sort of like investing something. You should be a scientist, be a lawyer, be one of the things that's going to survive in the future. The problem is that some of us really want to do this. And the only thing you need to know that you're legitimate at this is that wanting. A thing that I love to talk about is the idea of writing as magic. That people think that it's something you can only do when you're inspired, something that you can only do when you are blessed with a certain talent. And sure, there's something, I don't even know, like I'm gonna just say, do I know if talent is a thing that exists, or is it a thing that we named in our collective jealousy? Oh, she's so talented at that. Oh, he's so talented at that. It does us no good to think about talent. Instead, what is best for us to think about is freedom. Who do we need permission from to do this? You don't need permission from anyone. I have a degree in film. I am not 100% sure I have a high school diploma. I did this because I decided to do it. And I didn't let anybody stop me. And that's the only requirement for it. The minute we start applying magic to it, how did I know I was a writer? I don't know. Or what is a journalist? It's someone with a question and a pen. That's what my husband always says. What is a writer? If you have written a paragraph, I have good news. It is you. Now, how good you are at it will be a matter of something that you have to contend with. And that contention is about humility and about being willing to learn and being willing to be rigorous and willing to get feedback without defensiveness and willing to be edited. There's this kind of idea that we're at odds with our editors. People who are at odds with their editors or their fact checkers or their copy editors are very dumb, because those people are actually in the business of making your story better without taking any credit for it. I feel very bad for them, but that's how it goes. It's still your name on the thing. So I believe that people should write if they want to write, and that if you want to, you should. And you shouldn't let permission get in the way, because who's in charge of giving you permission? If it's me, I give it to you. I think you should go home and write something today. Yes, hi.
How would you recommend going about pitching stories to a newspaper?
Okay, you want to tell me where you're starting from? Do you want me to repeat the question? Is it easier for me to just, okay.
What recommendations do you have about pitching a story to a newspaper or a magazine?
It depends. Tell me where you're starting from personally.
Okay. So I've published locally and sort of regionally as a journalist in different newspapers. I've had a couple of national magazine pieces, but I was just trying to figure out how to, do more of that.
What are your stories about?
So it's a variety of things. I used to profile musicians, DJs for a hospitality magazine that was based here in Oxford, a trade magazine. And then I did a piece last year in Miss Magazine about, I was evaluating Cruel Intentions, the film, in light of the Me Too movement.
I read that.
I'm sorry?
I read that.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm not kidding you. I love that because I'm like obsessed with Cruel Intentions. I was like, there's new Cruel Intentions content?
Yeah.
Click.
I'm very flattered that you.
It's great.
That.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So now I can't think of what I was saying. But yeah,
It's so easy to please us as writers. It's sad. It's sad.
I guess you're asking specifically what I'm pitching, but
What do you want to pitch? Let's do it. Let's do the thing.
Okay, so all right. I met Jeffrey Owens recently, who was he played Alvin on the Cosby Show, and the past year he was involved in a situation. He was working at Trader Joe's, and some fans took photos of him and were publicly job shaming him since he was not a working actor anymore, or and so, but because of the Me Too movement, because of Cosby's actions and the Cosby Show being taken off the air, he wasn't receiving residuals anymore. But he wanted to still work. He wanted to still work as an actor. He directs in the New York area Shakespeare plays, and so he took this job in New Jersey so that he could still be able to go to auditions and still be able to do the work that he wanted to do. And so because I have a background in cultural studies and gender studies, I wanted to do some type of, and I do some race studies. I wanted to do some type of profile where, it was kind of a mix of the intersectionality of the problems that he's, sort of speaking against, and the class problems, because he's proud to be able to work. He's like not ashamed.
Trader Joe's is a good gig. I think you get like benefits and a pension. That's a good, like that Hawaiian shirt. It's a good job. Yeah. Do you have that here? Do you have Trader Joe's here? You will one day, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that.
So I wasn't prepared to tell the whole thing like that. But
this is a way to talk about it.
But sometimes I'll have ideas like that, and I'm trying to figure out the best audience to kind of pitch it to.
All right, let's figure out. So let's describe this story. It's a culture story. Mm-hmm. It is like a sociological story. It is a story about the way the world has changed, and it's an actor story. And it feels like a New York Magazine story to me. Does that sound right to you? Yeah. It feels like a great New York Magazine story. So the way I would pitch it is I would write down exactly what you just said and send it to the editor. You interviewed him already?
I've met him, and he gave me his email address so that we could talk more later.
That's great. You don't even have to talk about the access you have, because it's not like no one's going to be like, oh, can you get him? Like, you can get him. Yeah. But you can say, I have this, like, I keep thinking about the way this set of circumstances has screwed over this guy, and how he's making it work. Like, he is kind of, it's not just a Me Too thing. He is like at the center of every way the world has changed in a bad way, right? Or in a good way, and he's like the victim of progress, right? Yeah. He doesn't get residuals because nobody wants to watch the Cosby Show anymore. He wants to direct. He's now associated with this strange brand. Mm-hmm. That is really interesting to me. I think you should have a lot of confidence. And is your question now, how do you meet an editor?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do that.
Yeah.
What you would do is you would Google around to look for interviews with New York Magazine editors. Meaning, was there a panel discussion in December 2017 that featured the editor of the culture section? Who is that person? Then what you would do is you would call up Vox Media, which owns New York Magazine now, and you would say, what is the email protocol for New York Magazine editors? And then you would write to that person. And the other thing you would do is you would make sure that in your heart, you did not feel like any of these people were gatekeepers. Yeah. In your heart, what you would feel like is how lucky they were to be hearing from you, as you are a peddler of ideas and creativity, and they are in the business of acquiring ideas and creativity. That's amazing. It's like going to a swap meet, right? Yeah. So the idea that we're so intimidated, and the idea that we are so scared, and that is the same question that this man had. And the question is, who would pick me? And I'd rather that you would think, look how lucky these people are. Why not me?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Why not me on any of this stuff? So that's what you should do. And you should not worry that if you don't know anybody, because why would an editor be interested in hearing from any of you in this room? There are two reasons for it. Does anyone know what they are? You could just guess. Someone could guess. Young? That's actionable. They're not allowed to seek out young people. Give me another guess. Location. What?
Nobody knows how to speak.
Did you say location? There is location. There's a diversity of location that is. There's a diversity of location that is extremely important to people, because we are all very concerned that only people in New York are covering people in the rest of the country, and we know that people in the rest of the country don't love that. Wright lives here, and he is among the most in-demand people I know, and it is at least a fraction because he is not in one of the same three buildings everyone else is in. And I got my start when I was living in Los Angeles, which I know is not really the same thing, but here are the two reasons. Number one, that editors went into this because they're truly in the business of cultivating talent. They really want to be responsible for the next great voice that happens. There are people like me who are already established, and there are a couple of editors who take credit for taking my cold email. I didn't write an email saying, "Look who I'm your cousin from the weird side." I said, "Hi, I'm a writer. Good news, I have a story." But the other reason is because if you are not a well-known writer, is it becoming obvious? You will work for less money. Meaning there are a lot of people who cost a lot of money in this business, and sometimes you get to the end of a quarter and you have no money left, which is not the same, by the way, as writing for free, because you are nobody in this room who, I know that you are not all writers, but none of you ever has permission to write for free. Writing for free is what has led to the destruction of this industry. And it is something that is mostly targeted toward women. And in other industries, there are people who will say, you should write this for us for free because it will give you exposure. Well, I grew up in the Northeast. You could die from exposure. Did you know that? So I think that the most important thing for you to remember is that if you were to write for free, what you would be doing is you would be undermining an industry that you want to work in. You would be greatly angering the other people who are not getting paid as much as they would have been paid had the bottom been a little bit higher. And you are showing that you will do business with people who have no respect for you. So that's just my little sidebar, and I like to make sure that I say that in the name of all journalists, that you should not ever work for free. At anything, guys. At anything. Just whatever you're doing, don't work for free. If it's called your hobby if you do it without getting paid. So you'll take less money than someone who is better known, and someone is going to be very relieved to pay a little bit less money to someone who is not yet known for this. but you should go in confident, and you should tell the story from your soul, and you should only point out the things that jumped out to you, like I was saying before. And you should write in your own voice, because I think that like one of the greatest challenges of a writer is to figure out how to sound. Sometimes you read a story that is so beautifully raw, executed, that you can't believe it. And usually it comes down to voice, right? If you've ever read Wright Thompson's Michael Jordan at 50 profile, you will know what I mean. But people come to me a lot and they say, how do I sound like you? And the answer is, not that many people do that, just don't worry. But like people say, how do I have a sound? And the answer is that one of the hardest things about writing is to figure out a way to best sound like yourself. You are a very specific arrangement of molecules, and you have something to say. And as soon as your writing sounds like who you are, that's when you're doing it right. And sometimes you'll look at an article and you'll be like, this is a reaction I used to have at the beginning a lot, before I got enough validation to stop thinking of it, which is, this is not very fancy. And when my reaction to that was like, I don't have any statistics in here. I don't have any like big name secondary interviews. And the answer was, I don't want those things in my story. They slow down the read. So just remember that the stakes here in this business that does not pay too much, even when it pays as much as it pays, is that you can do what you want. There are some rules you have to follow, and those things are about word count, deadline, and absolute rigor to the truth. But other than that, be interesting. There's so much to read right now. You know, I was talking to someone in statistics at the Times who said to me, you have one of our highest rates of read through. And I was like, what does that mean? It's how long people stay on your story. Don't worry, no one's being monitored here. And I said, how long is it? Because I'm a slow reader, so it would take me like 25 minutes to get through one of my longer stories. And they said, 2.8 minutes. And I was like, what? But I wrote such a good ending. And the answer is, there is too much to read. And the mechanism you're on for reading also is a mechanism in which you're receiving text messages from your kid's school. You're playing word games on it. You are receiving phone calls on it. It is chaos. So try to be bold and write something outrageous and interesting so that people can't look away. That is what I see as my mission, other than that whole empathy thing I was talking about earlier. Yes, hi.
My name is Shima. I'm a graduate student. I have two questions.
Okay.
First one is that what do you think is storytelling similar to reporting?
Is it?
This is my first question.
Okay, should we go one at a time? This is not a ravenously curious crowd, so I think we can do two questions, right? The first question is storytelling similar
to reporting?
to reporting? No, they're completely opposite skills. Because writing, figuring things out is a different part of your brain than telling a story. And a story is an amazing thing. A story has a beginning, a middle, an end. It has themes, it has callbacks. It's an entirely different thing. I am better at storytelling than I am at reporting. I've had to work very hard to get good enough at reporting. But sometimes I have this research assistant. He's this like 28-year-old guy named Mick who works at GQ, and he works out maybe 17 hours a day. And I ask him a question, and he's like, blah, blah, blah. And he just hands it over to you. He's used the Freedom of Information Act to get stuff out of the government. He has found the place on the dark web where they keep old issues of details. He can do things that I cannot do, and I'm grateful for him, but I'm always trying to get better at it. Reporting also includes interviewing, and I think interviewing is a thing that it is really important to be good at. Having a conversation with people, keeping their interests, and making sure that that they've had their say. But storytelling is its own other thing. And to learn storytelling well, I read screenwriting books because journalists are only concerned with storytelling in a secondary way. And I want both of those things to be as prominent as the other. What's your second question?
So in that case, my second question is that what do you think that how the good storytelling piece can be written? And,
Well, I answered that. Amazing.
is the journalist should be empathetic to the events?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Issue or sympathetic?
Wait, start that one over again.
Second one?
Yeah.
Is the journalist should be empathetic to the events or issue or sympathetic?
Empathetic or sympathetic?
Yes, for writing a good storytelling.
I think empathy leads to sympathy. I think that all of those things are incredibly important in telling a human story. My question is always for people is, what are you doing with your access? Access is who you're interviewing and what you're seeing. If I'm telling a story on your behalf, if I'm going somewhere on your behalf and telling a story, I am going to make sure that I did everything I possibly could. Was it something I said? Is there a class change? Oh, is it time? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I've ruined it for everyone. Thank you guys.